Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Black Spinner Music Podcast. It's me, Andy Rodriguez, with my co-host Al Horta. How's it going, Al?
I'm going good, man. We were having a little trouble signing on here, but we're finally going. What's going
Well,
on?
that's right. Nobody knew. And also with us is our very always wonderful guest, Joseph Staub. How's it going, Joe?
Doing good. Thanks for having me on again. I'm excited for this topic.
Oh yeah, and the topic that we have today, we are doing the top 15. We're doing 15 this time because there were too many great albums in 1970 that were released. So we're doing the top 15 albums of 1970. 1970 was a big shift in music, not just rock. I mean, everything changed. R&B got heavier with their lyrics and got deeper with their sound. There were more country western songwriters coming out that they weren't being pre-made by Nashville. They started singing about real stuff. So, and pop music and singer songwriters were all starting to emerge in 1970. And also, we were introduced to something new called prog rock that would take over in the 70s. So 1970 was the year where everything just blew up and everything went in different directions and gave us a whole decade of great music. Um, we are going to start off with our segment, What's Spinning? So, Joseph, what do you got spinning, man?
All right. So I've been listening this past week to a lot of one artist, and it's anyone who is on any of the various Facebook pages that a lot of us are on will know that I in the last week have posted a couple different posts about Steve Hackett. So I've been picking up. I've had a couple of them. I've been picking up more of these live albums that he's been putting out the past decade or so.
Yeah.
And I mean, having now seen him in concert, I can attest his band is one of the best lineups of musicians I've ever seen. And all of these are amazing representations of that. And each one, every year, his tour has a different theme, and he'll always usually release a live album after every tour. So his most recent one was his band playing Foxtrot in its entirety with some of his solo stuff. Before that, it was Seconds Out in its entirety. And then probably 4 or 5 years ago, I think right before COVID was when this was filmed, it was Selling England by the Pound and Spectral Mornings. And then this is one from about 10 years ago, I think. This focuses a little bit more on his solo stuff with some kind of, at this point in his project, some Genesis songs that he hadn't played on the main Genesis Revisited tour that he had done in like.
Joe's freezing up a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Joe, you there? Boy,
Okay.
if it ain't a problem with me, it's problems. All right, man.
All right.
He'll come back.
Yeah, I'm going to let him go, let him come back in. Okay. Okay, let me see if I can
Man, he's frozen up, man.
Yeah, I'm going to mute him for now. Go ahead, Al. What have you been spinning, man?
Yeah, this week, past couple of days, I've been spending Humble Pie, rocking the Fillmore. There's Joe. Joe's back. Were you done talking, man? Okay. Yeah, you're muted. Okay, there you go.
Yeah, no, I think everything froze up there for a second after all your screens started spinning. But yeah, no, just kind of Steve Hackett, great stuff.
Dude, I want to see him again, man. I've seen him twice, and he's just awesome, man. I hope he comes down here to Florida, man. So,
and I know I saw he always starts his tours over in Europe, whenever he puts in like a new theme.
Yeah.
And his at the end of this year, he's starting a new tour in Europe, and it's for the 50th anniversary of The Lamb.
Oh, okay, yeah.
He's not playing the full album, which everyone kind of wanted him to play the full album. But it's like selections from The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, is what the theme is. So I'm interested to see if he pulls out any deep cuts, because I've noticed he kind of shies away from that album a lot when he does live stuff. I know he wasn't a huge fan of that album, mainly because he really didn't have much to do on it. It was not a very guitar-centric album.
Right.
But he's going to be playing some stuff from that, and everything I've seen him play off that album, I've really enjoyed on any of these albums. He's pull out some good stuff. I'm interested to see how his band takes on some of that stuff, especially if they pull out some deep cuts.
Yeah. I am hoping to buy a ticket because he's coming here to Houston April 9th.
Definitely, I would recommend going and checking it out. It's like I said, watching them play Foxtrot in its entirety was amazing.
Yeah, and if you're a fan of that real old Genesis dude, I mean, he puts on like he just does it justice, man.
Oh yeah, you're not going to get any other opportunity to see it performed like that.
Yeah,
because
you're seeing. Although I will say that band, the Musical Box, I've seen them too, and they're incredible. They're incredible as well. I mean, they recreate the old stages and the costumes and all that. So that's like the closest you'll come. Besides going to see Steve Hackett, but I mean they really do recreate like the old.
Oh yeah, I've seen them with like the stage setup and like the singer putting on Peter's costumes and everything. And
so I recommend them too if they ever come to your area. You know, great tribute band. So what I'm spinning has been Humble Pie Performance, Rockin' the Fillmore. This has been creeping up as like one of my favorite live albums of all time, man. I mean, I love Steve Marriott. I love Peter Frampton, Greg Ridley. I mean, they're all awesome on here, man. And I don't know, man, just the opener. I posted this on my group the other day, 4 Day Creep. It's like one of the best openers of a live album like ever, man. With Ridley and Marriott and Frampton trading off vocals, man. It's really awesome, dude. And I don't know, it just rocks. It kicks ass, man. And this is, I think if it wasn't for this album, man, I mean, there probably might have not been a Kiss Alive because they really kind of modeled the whole thing kind of after this, man. I mean, I mean, Paul Stanley was very influenced by Steve Marriott. So, and I was reading Geddy Lee's book, and he said he was very influenced by him too. And now, when I listen to Rush's first album, I could kind of hear a bit of that influence, man. He kind of sang a little bit like Steve Marriott in there, So, but I love that album, Rockin' the Fillmore. So that's my what's been spinning. So you go ahead, Andy. What have you been doing?
Yeah, we had a pretty cool show last Wednesday, and we were doing the albums by certain producers. So I pulled out an album that I've always just not liked or really never really spent time on. So I spent time on it this week, and I'm starting to really catch a little bit more than I did before. Black Sabbath's Heaven and Hell.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is the deluxe edition. It's got just 2 as bonus tracks, which is pretty much live tracks. But what kind of sucks is that it kind of has the same songs a couple of times. Like Heaven and Hell's like on there 3 times. I'm like, okay, I love the song, but geez, can you play something different? But still, it's starting to grow on me. Like I was telling Joseph earlier, I had the notions of this week to listen to all his the Deal era, the Mob Rules, and the I just had the other one here with me.
Dehumanizer?
Yeah, I just had it with me too. But I guess I misplaced it when I was talking about it. So I was gonna do that, but like I was telling Joe, how you say I'm gonna listen to this music this week and it never happens. You always do different things or you gotta do different shows and you listen to different things. So I just kept Heaven and Hell on repeat. It was, it was a really good album, and I like at least 7 out of, or is it 6 out of 8? Because there's 8 tracks on there, right?
Yeah.
8 tracks, I think.
Which 2 aren't you a big fan of?
I want to say
Wishing Well.
Oh no, I liked Wishing Well. I want to
Country
say Walk
Girl.
Away.
Country Girl.
That's on.
No,
Country Girl's on Mob.
That's
Rules,
on Mob
right?
Rules.
Mob Rules.
I'm sorry.
So I want to say Walk Away, and maybe Die Young.
Ooh.
6 and 7.
Wow, you don't like Die Young? Wow,
that is my favorite song off that album.
So it's something that's growing on me though. So that's what I've been spinning. Speaking of live tracks, Al, you went to go see Pantera a couple of days ago. How
Yeah,
was it?
I went. They played down here. They just kicked off their tour. I think Ralph Vieira actually went to the first show,
Uh-huh.
and there you go.
It's what
I think Ralph Vieira actually went to the first show, which was down near him, near Miami, and then I don't know if it was in Fort Lauderdale or whatever. I know it was more near him. And then the second, I went to the second night of the tour, which was Monday. It was in Tampa, and there was when I looked it up, and I got there a little late, but there was an opening band called Nest, and I looked them up, and I'm kind of regret like missing them now. They're kind of like an ambient kind of. They're from Finland, and I was looking them up, and I actually pulled up some of their music, and it was actually very like ambient kind of folk kind of stuff, like and it's only two guys in the band, and it was very interesting. If you ever get a chance, the band is Nest, like a bird's nest. It's Nest. They're a Finnish band, and they have a couple albums. I think like maybe 3 albums or something. Very interesting, man. I mean, very like if you're like driving in the night or you just want to kind of relax a little bit, and it's almost kind of very relaxing, like their music, and it's what they, which was kind of weird. Like maybe it was like Phil must have been a fan of them. He must have picked them to open up because it feels pretty eclectic when it comes to like certain like styles of music and stuff, genres, and so I just missed them. Like when I got there, they just unloaded. Then Lamb of God came on. Now Lamb of God, I'm not really like much of a fan of theirs. It's kind of not my thing, I saw them years ago with Slayer, and they just kind of never really did it for me. But it's a little more like extreme vocals, always like kind of more the growling stuff. It's not, and I like some melody injected into like vocals. So I don't know. They just never grabbed me. So, but there was a lot of the crowd that was into them. I mean, they certainly have their hardcore fans. So So I caught them, and then Pantera came on. I went in there like a little skeptical with Zach and all that, because nobody can ever really replace Dime. He has one of a kind, But I gotta say, man, some people say, put up like, oh, Zach sucks for this, or he's not the right fit. But I thought he did an admirable job, actually. I mean, I thought they sounded great with him. He doesn't have, it's not Dime's sound like perfectly like down. But it's Zach. Wow, dude. It's kind of him interpreting his friend. I mean, I think that's why like he did this tour, is because he was a very close friend to his, and it was just kind of the whole friend factor and stuff. But I thought he did a great job, actually. So Charlie Benante was spot on the drums, man. He sounded great, and Rex was Rex. He was bass, and then Phil, man, he doesn't jump around like the Phil of old because he has back problems, but he still commands the stage. He can command the crowd, man, and he's pretty funny on stage too. I got to give it to him, man. Some of the stuff he says cracks me up, but the energy level was great, man, and I thought it was a great show. I'd go see him again if they come around, So, yeah, the set list was great. They pulled out Floods, which was really cool. They hadn't played that since the original band, actually. So Pantera didn't play that at all like last year. So that was cool, man. That was kind of admirable, like, because that's a pretty epic, Dime, kind of song, you know what I mean? So it was cool, man. But overall, man, I enjoyed it. It was great.
Yeah.
And I saw Pantera in the '90s, so I saw the original. I saw Dime and Vinny and all of them. So I saw them when they ironically when they toured with the original Black Sabbath, when Black Sabbath got back together. I saw them then. So yeah, man, they were great, man.
Yeah, well, living down here in Texas, I saw them quite a bit.
Oh yeah,
especially there between '95 and '99.
Yeah.
Oh man, they were everywhere around here, so I got to see them quite a bit. But Joseph, you got to see them like a month ago, right?
Who, Pantera?
Yeah.
No, last September.
Oh, last September. Golly, has it been that long?
Mm-hmm.
Was it
thought
when
Yeah.
they played with Metallica, or they did a show on their own?
No, it was the last date of their solo tour. It was
Okay.
and it was Lamb of God opening for them as well.
Okay.
Which I'm not a big Lamb of God fan either. They were okay, and like you, I saw them opening for Slayer as well before, so not a huge fan of them. But like you said, Pantera, I really didn't have many expectations going into it, but they were great. I thought they all did a great job. It was the end of the tour, so Phil's voice wasn't as probably pristine as it would have been when you saw him this week.
Yeah, he sounded
but
good, man.
he still sounded good to me, even on the last day of the tour.
Awesome.
One surprise, and well, it's a surprise and it's kind of not a surprise, but they didn't play Cemetery Gates. But then, I don't think Phil's gonna hit those notes anymore. So
That was the one thing when I looked at the set list leading up to it, I was kind of happy they didn't. That song is one that I do not want to see performed live by anyone except the original lineup.
yeah.
Like that, I don't. I love Zakk Wylde. That is one solo I do not want to see him play.
Yeah.
I don't want him.
You
I
got
do
a
not
point
want
there,
to
man.
see. And like that's I liked what they did where they do the same thing for you guys where they played the video of Cemetery Gates part of it.
Yes.
And like with like it like halfway through the show they played part of Cemetery Gates on a video with like some video footage of Vinny and Dime.
Yeah, they were showing footage of them like all throughout,
Mhm.
kind of the show. I thought they paid a good respect to them, man.
Mm-hmm. Because I know the big difference in the set list between last year and this year is, like you said, you guys got Floods. We got it was the Sabbath cover.
Planet Caravan?
Planet Caravan.
Okay.
And that was the lead into Planet Caravan was like they played like the first part of Cemetery Gates over the loudspeakers.
Oh. No,
with like
they didn't
footage.
do that. No. They didn't
Yeah.
do that.
Okay, so that's what they were doing last year was like they played the first like verse of Cemetery Gates over the loudspeaker with some footage.
Okay.
And then went into Planet Caravan.
Okay. No, they didn't do that this time. So.
All right. So today's episode, we are going to be talking about our top 15 albums of 1970. So let's get started. Let's go, Joe, Al, and myself, and let's get started. And thank you everybody for watching out there. There's quite a bit of people out there. Thanks a lot to Mark Alden Taylor and to Jimmy Schwartz, who does watch us every week. So let's get started, guys. Let's go, Joe.
All right. So, of course, to start off my list, everyone who has watched this show in the past knows of my love for the genius of Frank Zappa. And so I will be starting off my list with one of 3 albums that he released in 1970. We may or may not revisit that part of the discography a little bit later on the list. But at my number 15, I'm going to go with Chunga's Revenge, which is the first of the Flo and Eddie albums. To me, it's the only one of the Flo and Eddie albums I like because it has the least of their intrusions on it. And I use that word on purpose because I do feel like they were an intrusion into Frank Zappa's band.
They were.
I think there's some great. It's kind of a mix. This album, it's half of it. It was supposed to be the follow up to Hot Rats, which actually just got released this past year as Funky Nothingness, the new CD that they put out with some of the tracks that ended up on Chunga's Revenge. There's stuff like Transylvania Boogie and the song Chunga's Revenge, and mainly some of the instrumentals were supposed to be the follow up to Hot Rats. And then when Flo and Eddie joined, they wrote songs like Road Ladies and Charlena and stuff like that was also on the album. So it's kind of a mix of different eras, and I like that. My favorite stuff, of course, is the instrumental stuff on here because of Flo and Eddie being on the songs that have vocals. But a really cool fact about this album is the song Road Ladies was actually later covered live by another one of my favorite bands, Nazareth.
Oh,
They did a cover of Road Ladies, and it's on the BBC in Concert album that they did. And it's also on, they have those like 2010 remasters with all the bonus tracks and stuff on it that I have all of back here.
Right.
It's on one of those as well. So they did a really cool version of a Frank Zappa song, which is kind of cool for me being a huge fan of both. weird worlds that you would never think would cross, but they do.
Oh yeah,
So
that's what I
yeah,
was gonna say. That's kind of odd for a
yeah,
Nazareth of all
yeah.
bands to do
You
a
wouldn't
cover of a
think, but yeah. So that's my number 15 is Chunga's Revenge, one of my all-time favorite quotes by our friend Ian Wadley when they were reviewing Zoodalures with Scott Parker. At the end of the episode, Ian Wadley said, "So Scott, I'm loving these 180 gram remasters. When are they going to put out 180 gram for an album that rhymes with Chunga's Revenge?"
That's very Ian.
Very much so. And they finally did later that year, thankfully. Great 180 gram.
Yeah, that's a great album. I like that album too by Zappa. But you'll be surprised that I did not put any Zappa on my list this time around.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. There was one that was going back and forth on, and I'm pretty sure you're going to mention it, and I'll talk about it.
Probably.
At that time. Go ahead, Al. What are you starting off with?
Well, I had to put this on my list because as a kid, my parents, this is one of the first times I ever got as a kid by my parents. The Osmonds. This is actually the copy that my parents gave me. But anyway, I'm only kidding. I'm not going to put that on my list. Nah, number 15 is actually going to be Moody Blues, A Question of Balance.
Nice.
Moody Blues is very credited with kind of starting the whole like kind of progressive kind of, because they had albums like, in the 60s, kind of like epic like storytelling stuff. And this is the album that they released in 1970. And I love this album. It's got that song Question, which is like probably the most popular one on here. But it's got How Is It and Tortoise and the Hare. It's got a few really good songs on here. So they were really like releasing a bunch of great albums in a row, and this was definitely one of them. And I revisited this album actually like recently too, and I've seen the Moody Blues in concert too, and they put on a great show. And as a matter of fact, I think it was like last year, 2 years ago, I saw Justin Hayward like solo, and it was him and actually Christopher Cross, and it was cool. They kind of did a tour together, and it was just him like acoustic and with I think with like two other people or something. He obviously played a lot of Moody Blues and stuff, so which was great. But I seen the whole Moody Blues band like a few years ago, and they sounded great, man. So, so I'm gonna go with A Question of Balance as my number 15.
That's a good album.
I gotta run out for a second. I'll be right back.
Yeah, sure. My number 15. I thought this was going to be a little higher when I started my list, and then it started to drop as others went higher. And but still, it's a fantastic album. Santana. This is a really good album. Of course, it starts off with a great instrumental, and then it goes to Black Magic Woman, Oye Como Va, which is always such a fun track. But Sampa Para Ti is just a really good, that slow balladry solo instrumental is so good. And of course, Greg Raleigh plays such a huge part in this band. And then he will until he goes and forms, helps form Journey. But still, they did a lot of great stuff together. Carlos Santana and Greg Raleigh. So number 15, I'm going to start off with this Santana album. Really good. Like I said, I thought it was going to be higher, and then it just kept falling. So that's my number 15. All right. Go for it, Joe.
All right. So my number 14 is an album that I guarantee is going to be a lot higher on Andy's list specifically. I'm not sure about Al or not, but I'm sure this is on Andy's list. And this is an album that I am newer into. It's an artist that I never really dived very deep into, and I know Andy is very into this artist, and that is After the Gold Rush by Neil Young. Just a lot of classics on here. The title track, After the Gold Rush, Southern Man, of course, being the big hit off the album. Just some other great stuff on here, opening up with Tell Me Why, Just some really, really good stuff on this album. Really kind of one of the first albums by Neil Young that really kind of grabbed me. And of course, this was a big year for all of those involved in the Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young collective.
Yeah.
Stephen Stills' first solo album came out this year. Of course, Deja Vu came out this year, which, spoiler alert, is not on my list. I'm not a huge fan of that whole thing. But it's was a big year for all of them, and I think that the best album to come out of that whole sector was After the Gold Rush. So that's my number 14 is Neil Young, After the Gold Rush.
Solo on my list. I almost have, because I do like Still solo.
I love my favorite song on any of those albums is Love the One You're With. It's my favorite song of any of those three albums. That's my favorite song, but I'm not really familiar with a lot of the rest of that album as much as I am with After the Gold Rush.
Good pick. It might come out on mine. I don't know yet. It might.
just possibly.
Maybe.
What's
your number 14, buddy?
I'd be willing to bet money on that. My number 14, I'm gonna go with this is actually the Bitches Brew Sessions I picked up on Record Store Day, but I'm actually gonna go with Bitches Brew, Miles Davis. It's like arguably it could be the birth of jazz fusion. You know, I mean, he's really credited as kind of starting that. And this is really the key album of that beginning of that, that would fusion that would take place throughout the 70s. Bitches Brew, man. I mean, I got into Miles Davis because my older brother, and because I was never really a jazz head until I started. I mean, my brother got me into hard rock metal when I was a kid, and then after he got married, moved out, and then I actually, when I got a little older, I got a job and started working with him for 12 years straight. And in the office, he'd have jazz on a lot, and I really just started getting into it. And Miles Davis was one of his favorites, man. I really got into him, and this is actually the Bitches Brew Sessions that came out on Record Store Day, but the actual proper Bitches Brew album came out in 1970. So I'm gonna put that on my number 14. Very key game-changing album.
Joe, did you want to say something about that album?
Possibly.
Okay. Oh, okay. In the future.
Oh no, I hope I didn't steal any thunder. Shit.
My number 14 is going to be a band that I really love, and I thought that might be higher, but it kept on dipping lower and lower on my list when things got higher and higher. Again, the Allman Brothers, Idlewild South.
Yes.
Y'all know how much I love Allman Brothers. Revival, such a great opener on here. Revival, you got the big hit, Midnight Rider, the beautiful In Memory of Elizabeth Reed, which we will hear over and over, done differently live in so many different live sessions. Their cover of Hoochie Coochie Man, which is great. And also, Leave My Blues at Home. I was listening to that song again today at work while, when thinking of how it's going to place it. Actually, there's so much of Layla on there because of Dwayne. But you can hear a lot of the second part of Layla with his slide being played. How he kind of took that with him to the Layla sessions. So number 14, Allman Brothers, Idlewild South.
Great pick, man.
I love that album. All right, Joseph, number 13.
I think I'm just going to stop making picks. I really do. I think this is probably the 10th time that Al has gotten to my pick right before I talk about my pick.
Sorry, man.
It's just so funny that it keeps happening. Poor silly stupid me. I didn't think anybody was going to bring up Bitches Brew, but here we are. That's my number 13 is Bitches Brew. I mean, what a great, like Al said, possibly the creation of jazz fusion. I mean, you look at all the people in that band playing on that album. I mean, in that one album, you got Return to Forever coming out of that. You got Mahavishnu coming out of that. You got Herbie Hancock and the Headhunters coming out of that. You have so much of what defined jazz fusion throughout the 70s. I mean, I'm sure there's a Weather Report connection in there somewhere too. But
well, it's right here. Ron Carter, Chick Corea,
yeah,
Jack DeJohnette, Herbie Hancock, Dave Holland, John McLaughlin, Wayne Shorter, Joe Zawinul. I mean, it's just incredible. Like
it's literally it's literally the entirety of jazz fusion on that album. All put together by one of the most, in my opinion, genius musicians to ever live. I mean, Miles Davis's discography, just to go from style to style and be master of all of them, and basically whenever he started to get comfortable in one style, he'd force himself to move on to the next thing just to keep himself fresh. I mean, you listen to in succession, you listen to some of the early stuff, and you listen to Kind of Blue, and then you pull out something like In a Silent Way into Bitches Brew, into the Jack Johnson tribute, any of his quintet eras. I mean, just the man was a genius, and this is a perfect example of why, and basically invented an entire genre. And pretty much fostered all of the core musicians that would populate that genre, pretty much.
Yeah, I got to hear that album because I've never heard it, but I'm very familiar with Chick Corea and the Mahavishnu Orchestra and all that stuff, but I'd never heard Bitches Brew. So that's something that's
phenomenal album. I mean, Pharaoh's Dance, just right from the open, what a way to open an album. It's 4 20-minute tracks. Like it's basically a better version conceptually of Yes's Tales from Topographic Oceans. It's a double album, and each side is a single song.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, man.
Yeah, I gotta check that out.
Yeah, check it out, Andy, man. Seriously, So my 13 is going to be Mountain Climbing by Mountain, Leslie West, obviously Felix Papalari, and Corky Lang. Of course, it opens up with the iconic Mississippi Queen. I don't have a physical copy of it, or here actually. I have the CD, but I don't have the CD here. I need to get it on vinyl. But Mississippi Queen, theme from Imaginary Western, great track. I mean, I've always been a fan of Leslie West playing.
He's great.
I mean, he had some heavy riffs, man, way early on too. I mean, you can credit Mountain with seeds of like metal and stuff, like, because a lot of guitar players were influenced by him, man. So, and I got to meet Leslie West twice, and he was always a very kind, gracious dude, man. I wish I would have got a picture with him though, but I do have his autograph, and he was really cool. So I'm gonna go with Climbing by Mountain as my number 13. It's got For Yasgur's Farm on there too.
Yeah, I really like to hear them play. It's just like Mountain's a band that they can just throw on an album and enjoy some really good melodic hard rock with some great soloing. I love it.
Connection.
Speaking of Metal Mike going to go see Glenn Hughes today. We were talking about that earlier today. My number 13 is an album that I'm starting to fall in love with. Medusa.
Yeah.
By the band Trapeze.
Yes.
1970. This also has on a guitar was Mel Galley, which we know how Mel Galley. I mean, we've talked so many times about how all these hard rock blues bands intertwine with each other, and he intertwined big time with late 70s, early 80s Whitesnake. Yeah. And also, Dave Holland is on drums on this album.
Yeah, from Judas. Yeah, that went on to be to Judas Priest. Yeah,
Judas Priest. Yeah,
but his style is very much different. Like on those Trapeze albums, he's very much more a busier drummer. Like, like when he was in Judas Priest, people, thought it was a bit more groove oriented. A bit more, not as busy and stuff like that. But he was a damn good drummer, man. I thought so.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He completely. He's like a little jazz drummer on this one. He stays busy, and Glenn Hughes' vocals, his young vocals are awesome on here, man. They really are. and the guitar playing by Galley, really, he really does a lot of his own on here because we know that when he moved on, he played a lot with White Snake and what they wanted, but it was really neat how these three guys just played whatever they wanted, and it sounded great. And I was talking to my uncle about them, and they've got a live album from 1972 from Houston, but I haven't heard it yet. I'm gonna go ahead and stream that because that sounds interesting. All right, number 12.
All right. So for my number 12, I know when Andy gave his kind of overall introduction to this, one of the genres that he mentioned on his overview was prog rock. And there's only one prog rock album that I have on my list. I think 1970 was kind of actually a bit of a lull year for prog rock. I mean, you have stuff like Genesis starting to find their footing with Trespass, which I like, but isn't what they would become with Nursery Crime the next year. Same thing with Yes, with Time and a Word, eventually morphing into the Yes album in 71. Same thing with King Crimson, who was kind of in a bit of a weird space between the original and then with the John Wetton lineup coming in 72, 73, and 74. So the only really major standout prog album for me in 1970 came when three of the most influential musicians in prog rock music formed one of the most, at times, criticized and at times lauded. For me, they're amazing. I love them. Supergroups in music history, known only by their last names, and that is the debut album from Emerson, Lake and Palmer. I mean, one of their biggest hits, Lucky Man, is on that album. There you go. Al has it right there. Take a Pebble, Knife Edge, Barbarian, Tank. So much great music, both instrumental and vocal, is on that album.
Yeah,
I think Greg Lake's voice is always just he has such an amazing voice. I mean, you listen to Lucky Man, but then you listen to some of their heavier stuff like Tank and the Barbarian on that album, and it shows that they had a lot of light and shade in their music, and it really, right from the get-go, is just phenomenal. I mean, that run that they had with the debut album and Pictures in an Exhibition, Tarkus, Brain Salad Surgery, Trilogy,
yeah,
into the live album. So between the first album and the live album, it's just pretty much a flawless run for me of really albums. Unfortunately, they would lose their way later on in the 70s when they would take a far too long break, in my opinion, return with the Works albums that had a lot of good moments, but also at the same time kind of meandered. But nothing for me is ever going to touch the first 4 studio albums and the first 2 live albums. Just that run, so amazing. And the first album is a great way to kick that off. Just an absolutely perfect album for me.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, that's a really good album, and unfortunately dropped off on my list. But yeah, it was an album that I was seriously I'm considering because Tarkus is my second favorite by them. I love Tarkus. The title track is amazing.
Oh yeah. For me, my favorite will always be Brain Salad Surgery because that was the one that I was brought up on. That's one of my dad's favorite albums, and we listened to that album all the time when I was growing up. So I kind of, the pieces are starting to form together as to where my music taste came from. And when you're brought up on an album like Brain Salad Surgery, you know there's going to be a couple screws loose somewhere.
Right. What's your number? 13?
12.
12.
My number 12, I'm going with he was considered one of the fastest guitarists of his time, of that time. His name is Alvin Lee from 10 Years After.
Yeah.
And this is Cricklewood Green. I've had this album for years too, his final album. And Alvin Lee, man, considered one of the fastest for the time, man. And he's awesome on here. And this is engineered by Andy Johns. And it sounds great, dude. I mean, for 1970, I love the production on this. You got Sugar on the Road, Working on the Road, 50,000 Miles Beneath My Brain, which is cool. Love Like a Man, and The Sun Still Burns Away. Killer album. If you never heard Alvin Lee or 10 Years After, man, good stuff, dude.
Very
And
good.
I'm gonna put that at number 12.
You know, and another thing about 10 Years After, their production was ahead of its time.
Yeah,
It really
yep,
was, because like albums like Watt, WATT, and Stonehenge are just so out of time, pretty much.
yeah,
And the thing with Alvin Lee was that not only was he the guitar player, he was also the singer, songwriter. I mean, it was his baby. And then when he went off on his own, but yeah, that's a great pick. That's a really good pick.
thank you.
My next one is going to be one that again I thought was going to be higher, um, but Deep Purple in rock.
Ooh,
Yeah, that's number 12 for me. I really
Mm.
thought it was going to be higher because this is one of my favorite albums by them. You know, Child in Time was just an amazing song, and Speed King and Bloodsucker, and man, it irks me to put it so low. It just does, but um, I'll talk more
a lot
about
of
it.
great albums in 1970, man. So
Yes,
Yeah,
there were.
amazing album. So this is going to be number 12, Deep Purple in rock.
great album.
Yeah, it is. But man, 1970 was a mofo. It was.
Hmm.
Ugh. All right, what do you got for number 11, Joe?
All right. So for me, this is a little bit of an underrated album, but for me, it's an album where this particular artist kind of finally put all the pieces together. This particular artist released a couple albums in the late 60s that,
Mhm.
in my opinion, weren't very good and were kind of meandering, and then had a really big hit in 69. But for me, this is the album where he finally put it all together. A lot of people would say it wouldn't be for another year that he finally put it all together. But for me, that is David Bowie with "Man Who Sold the World."
Mm.
Um, Most people would say a lot of people would say it wasn't until Ziggy Stardust, but I think "Man Who Sold the World" is kind of coming up in a lot of people's opinions lately. I've seen a lot of talk about that album in particular, and I'm really glad. Of course, a lot of people mainly know it because of Nirvana covering the title track on their Unplugged album. So
Right.
people from that generation really kind of know it because of that. But I mean, there's so many great tracks on that album. I'm glad it's finally starting to get its due a little bit more. But yeah, I think for me that is kind of where David Bowie kind of started to put a lot of the pieces together after his self-titled albums in the 60s, and he had the big hit with um,
Space Odyssey.
Space Oddity in 69. And then this is when he finally kind of put everything together for me. I mean, you got songs like Width of a Circle on here, Black Country Rock, All the Madmen, and of course the title track. But I'm glad to see it's kind of coming up in a lot of people's opinions, because for a while it was an album you really didn't get talked about a whole lot. People kind of jumped into the Ziggy Stardust kind of era, and then everything that came after that. But for me, that's an album that I would definitely recommend to people who are looking to get into David Bowie, because it kind of covers all the bases in a way.
It really does. And it's really the beginning to his electric style
Yeah,
with Mick Ronson, I think is on that album too.
I think so.
There's
Yeah.
so many different album covers
Hmm.
to that. It's an odd album because it's got so many different album covers for the Man Who Saw the World. Because my cover is just black and has him like kicking in the sky, but
Hmm.
then I've seen others where
Yeah, because there's this one where he's like laying on the couch.
yeah,
That's like the famous one.
right. That's the famous one.
And then there was one of like the original one was like a comic photo or like a comic drawing of a guy with a gun or something like that. And it was like that was the original American release.
Right,
But yeah, so kind of I don't think that did it many favors all the different ways it was released.
right. Yeah, yeah. Again, it was just odd because when I found mine, I was like, this album cover doesn't look right. But I'll take a picture of it and I'll send it y'all's way. Oh, what's your next one?
Well, Andy already touched on this one, but it's the second album by Santana, Braxis.
Mhm.
I got the vinyl of that as well. Yeah, Greg Raleigh, man, his voice is awesome on this.
Awesome.
I've always loved his vocals, even on those early Journey albums, man. basically Journey would be kind of born out of Santana, like because Neil Sean came into them then after this. But yeah, it's got Black Magic Woman, obviously, which was a Fleetwood Mac song written by Peter Green. But he made it more famous, with his version. Samba Party, Oyo Como Va, those are the big hits off this album. And I love the production of it, man. Great album. I think it's like one of his best albums.
Oh yeah.
You can go with like first 3 albums, first 4 albums, probably like that is a great run of albums by him. And I think this might be my favorite though. So Abraxas by Santana is my number 11.
He's got that other album with John McLaughlin. That's a fucking killer. Oh,
yeah.
It was Surrender or something like that. I've got it over here on this side, but God. And then that's what sent me to go find the
Mahavishnu. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And dude.
Oh yeah, that first era of Mahavishnu is just phenomenal.
Insane.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I've only got one album, and that's the Trident Studios album.
That's a great album that turned into the live album.
Yeah, exactly. My next one I've got on cassette, and dude, I'm telling you, this album doesn't stop. This album from beginning to end just pulverizes your head, and it's so funny because on the Rock and Roll Over You podcast with Ed Canastrassi and with Eric Honestly P. Jordan, they just did a show on this band Raw Power. But I'm going with Funhouse for my number 7. No, wait, number 11?
10. 11. Oh, yeah, 11.
11. The Stooges with Funhouse.
Oh, yeah.
Dude, this album from beginning to end, it doesn't stop. And if you love the Stooges, towards the end, the title track is a 7-minute of just Stooges just freaking out of their minds. So Stooges,
that's
Funhouse. And I saw them here a few years ago during a really cool festival, and of course it wasn't the original band. And my wife said, "Why does he put on a shirt? How old is he?" I said, "I don't want to see this dude with a shirt. I want to see all the wrinkles and blood and all sorts of shit this dude has, all the needle markings. I don't give a damn." And this dude was awesome. I mean, he looked like he was nuts on that stage, Iggy. So that's my number 11 or 10.
11. Yep.
11. The Stooges with Funhouse. If you people out there haven't given this album a shot, it's their second album, and it's so good. And then they will change lineups for Raw Power. They will change the guitar players, which the guitar player did get better, but this is just raw, just going at it with whatever they wanted to do. So,
yeah,
Funhouse by the Stooges.
Proto punk, man.
Yeah, it is, or proto metal or whatever. It like had no label to it. Yeah. They just blew your ears out. Amazing album. All right, Joseph, go for it.
All right. So I'm sure this is an album and a band that will be brought up multiple times again by everyone involved. They released 2 albums in 1970. This is the second that they released, and that is Paranoid by Black Sabbath. I mean, what can you say? It's one of the most famous metal albums of all time. Mm-hmm. Title track, Iron Man, War Pigs, Fairies Wear Boots, Electric Funeral. Pretty much every track on this album has become famous because of how often this album is brought up in terms of greatest metal albums. For me, it's not. Even if you look at the ranking of Black Sabbath albums from the 70s, it's towards the bottom for me. But I think it's still a phenomenal album because it's still a Black Sabbath album from the 70s. But just so many amazing tracks on this album. Bands hitting it out of the park. Literally the first year of their career. Everyone is just firing on all cylinders. some of Tony Iommi's most famous riffs, some of Geezer Butler's most famous lyrics. And then, of course, Bill Ward and Ozzy just absolutely killing it. So, I mean, what else is there to say that hasn't already been said about Paranoid? So,
Great pick. Great pick. Ow.
I'm just going to show the album. I'm not even really going to talk about it because everybody knows this band, and that's Let It Be by the Beatles. A lot of people probably think it should be higher on my list. It could be, I mean, but this was the last album that they released. Not the last album that they recorded, but that they released. Mm-hmm. But obviously, Get Back is actually one of my favorite songs. And Let It Be, obviously, the title track. You got Maggie May on here. I Think a Pony, Two of Us. I mean, you don't have to go through the tracks. Everybody knows the Beatles pretty much. If you don't, you're an idiot. You know what I mean? So that's going to be my number 10 is the Let It Be, man.
What I found interesting about 1970 is that there are 6 direct Beatles-related studio albums that were released in 1970.
Yeah.
3 of them made my list. 3 of them did not.
Oh. Yeah.
We'll be interested to see how it shakes out on everybody else's list. But spoiler alert, the one that Al just held up did not make my list.
Interesting.
I am not a fan of that album.
Interesting. Huh. I'm interested now what the others would be. My number 10. I like to call this band America's answer to Sabbath. Even though they only made this one album in 1970, I think they came out with an EP later on, but it didn't hit that good. Then I was hearing it this morning, and then it's not that Sabbathy, but it's really good. Sir Lord Baltimore.
Oh, yeah. That's a heavy album, man.
With Kingdom Come from, a bunch of, I think it's a 4-piece or a 3-piece, guys. But they're out of New York, I think.
I think it's a 4-piece, I think.
3-piece.
Is it a 3-piece? Okay.
It's a 3-piece, yeah.
Okay.
Interesting.
I used to get that album, man.
To photograph the 4th guy. Yeah, but they just have 3 guys here. The lead guitar and bass, and the lead singer and drummer. Interesting.
A friend of mine who was really into them, he made me a CDR copy of that album, so I only have that. But I'd like to pick up the vinyl because I remember listening to it, man. I was like, wow, for 1970 is pretty fucking heavy, man.
Yeah, it was very heavy for 1970, and I found this for like $2.
Yeah,
a couple of years ago, and I picked it up because I had read, the name before, and I looked it up. I said, oh, that sounds interesting. And when I brought it home, I was like, holy crap.
Yeah.
There's a point where I've talked about this album several times.
Great stuff, man.
That's how much I like this album.
Yeah.
So, Sir Lord Baltimore. I think Jeff Beers was talking about it a couple of weeks ago too, but I wasn't home, so I wasn't able to take a picture and start talking about it. I was at work, and then what are you doing on your phone and blah blah blah. So, my number 10 is Sir Lord Baltimore. Go for it.
All right. So another album that I'm sure is going to get some love later on from you guys. Another one that there's not much you can say about. I think this is of the albums in this band's discography. This is one that I don't think gets talked about as much as the ones immediately surrounding it, and that is Led Zeppelin 3.
Oh yeah.
I mean, of course, everyone knows Immigrant Song. That's really when everyone thinks of this album, that's the first song that comes to a lot of people's mind. But there's so many other amazing songs on this album. Since I've Been Loving You is great. Gallows Pole, Tangerine is just a beautiful track. I think this is an absolutely amazing album. Like I said, it kind of gets overshadowed by particularly the albums that bookend it. Led Zeppelin 2 and Led Zeppelin 4, which are 2 of the most famous albums of that era. And I think this kind of gets stuck in the middle, and everyone's like, oh yeah, Immigrant Song is great. And then that's all you really ever hear.
Right.
But there's so many other amazing tracks on this album that I think deserve a lot more attention because, of course, it's Led Zeppelin. Everyone owns this album. At some point in their life, everyone owns this album. But I think it's There it is. I think it's absolutely an amazing album and deserves its status among those other amazing albums.
Yep, great pick because that has always been one of my favorites. My favorites jump from 1, 3, and Houses. Always change, but I'll talk about that later. I'll go ahead, Al.
All right, my number 9, and I don't have I have the CD of it. I don't have it here with me, but it's King Crimson's in the Wake of Poseidon, which is the second album and the final album that Greg Lake would be on vocals. Because obviously this year, like Joe said before, he went on to form ELP.
Mm-hmm.
But I love the early King Crimson stuff, especially the first 2 albums with Greg Lake. I love that. But I love the stuff with what's his name from John Wetton when he became the singer. So, but this is a great album. It's got the Devil's Triangle, which is a cool, pretty much an epic track, like story kind of song, real long. So I think it's like over 11 minutes or whatever. It's got Peace of Beginning, which is a little thing going into pictures of a city. Of course, you got Robert Fripp, you got Greg Lake, you got Michael Giles on drums, killer drummer, man. I actually influenced Neil Peart. Yeah, he cited him as an early influence, so he loved King Crimson. So I'm gonna go with that at number 9, man. In the Wake of Poseidon by King Crimson.
Oh, awesome. I never got into them, and I've been wanting to try. So,
they're a hard band to get into. I love King Crimson, particularly the John Wetton stuff. Both eras, both the Lark's Tongue era, the mid 70s, and then
Lark's Tongue and Aspic,
and then like the Discipline era in the early 80s as well. But they're a tough nut to crack. They really are. They're
Adrian Belew later on,
mm-hmm, with Adrian Belew, Bill Bruford, and John Wetton, of course, with Robert Fripp. But they're not nearly as accessible as
they're not,
like Yes and Genesis. And I think once you get them, I think they're one of the most rewarding bands to listen to. But there's some where you just like people that have been fans for 40 years still just kind of scratch their head like, I mean, definitely I would say In the Court of the Crimson King is definitely the first place to check out. Mm-hmm. But there's almost nothing else in their discography that sounds like that. They're a band that went through a lot of different sort of sounds.
Yeah.
Just because Robert Fripp he's an eclectic dude. He really is. Yeah. But they're once you get into them, they're an amazing band to listen to.
I will look into that. Cool. My next one is going to be a band that I've been getting into because of my uncle and my friends Dave and Lewis. They think they belong in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I'm not quite there yet. I don't think I ever will be. But they are a great band, and they do have an album that was produced by Frank Zappa. But this isn't it. That's later on in the 70s. But Grand Funk came out with Closer to Home in 1970. It's a great album, man, and it's perfect to the way that I like to end my albums with a great with a great epic track, which is going to be the title track. I'm Your Captain. It's almost 10 minutes long.
Yeah.
And, I've really been getting into Grand Funk. I've got almost everything that they released up until 1981. After that, I didn't need it anymore. But yeah, man, Grand Funk Railroad, really great band. A 3-piece for the longest time. Their best output was with a 3-piece. And then they went in and added a keyboard and kind of took away from Mark Farner's guitar because Mark Farner played a really good, solid guitar. So that's going to be my pick here. It's going to be Grand Funk Railroad.
Sometimes people don't realize how heavy a band they were, man, because like, you hear their hits or whatever.
Yeah, and that's what turned me off.
But when you dig deep, man, that band had some great riffs and like fucking heavy, man. You know, they were killer.
Yeah, because the only thing I knew from them was an American band.
Yeah.
And when they did that cover for Locomotion, I was like,
yeah,
this band's really? And then
it's not really representative of them, you know, really. So
at all. And then one day I bought Phoenix on one of their albums. I said, well, you know, it's $1. I'll pick it up. And ever since then, I was like trying to get everything that I possibly can.
yeah.
You know, I got their couple of double live albums and, you know, their debut all the way on. So they're a really good hard rock band. And their two big singles take that away from them pretty much. So, yeah, man, Grand Funk. It's a great band. Love them. All right, Joe, what do you got next?
All righty. So next, kind of following the theme that I've talked about a little bit, is artists that I think are kind of coming into their own a little bit in 1970. And this artist released 2 albums in 1970. I really enjoyed both of them, but I'm going with the second one that he released in 1970, and that is Elton John with Tumbleweed Connection.
Oh, yeah.
He, of course, also released a self-titled album earlier in 1970 with Your Song and Border Song both on it.
Yeah.
But this one, it's kind of interesting in his discography. It's almost a concept album. It's a lot of themes of the American West. Songs like Ballad of a Well-Known Gun, Burn Down the Mission, Amarina, some great tracks on this album that all kind of fit that kind of Western theme.
Yeah.
And of course, he'd get huge the following year with Man Across the Water, with Tiny Dancer, and then even bigger from there in 72 and 73. But I think this is a really interesting jumping on point for Elton John because it's an album that really doesn't have any hits, but it's a lot of songs that he would still pull out live, especially if you listen to any of his concerts from the 70s. You get the Here and There CD. There's a lot of stuff from this album on there, and I think it's some of Elton John and Bernie Taupin's most sort of intriguing music, and I think it's a great jumping on point for his discography as well.
Oh, you know, but that's one thing about that album. It's so different from everything else.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with the sound and pretty much that's an album that's got a landscape to it.
Yeah.
And there's no other album that he ever released that came close to sounding that way. And it was kind of odd for me. So I mean, of course I got it because I'm a great big Elton John fan, but I just can't get into that theme of it. It's weird for me.
Mm.
But because for me, what I really liked the most by him was, you know, Madman Across the Water, Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player, and of course, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, and of course Honky Chateau. I loved Honky Chateau because that's more of the Elton John sound that I love, and that's why, you know, I guess maybe I need just to go back to Tumbleweed Connection and listen to it differently, you know, because sometimes we grow into albums like I just said earlier with Heaven and Hell. You know, I used to not even give that a chance at all. So Tumbleweed Connection is an album that I do need to go back to because everything else after that I absolutely loved. Even Caribou and Blue Moon I thought were really good. So I gotta check that out. Thanks a lot for bringing that up.
Yeah.
All right, what's going on now?
All right, my number 8 is going to be probably my favorite album by this band, and they have a string of albums that I love though, and but it's Jethro Tull's Benefit. I love this album. It's actually signed by Martin Barre right there. I met him twice, and he was very nice to take a picture with me and sign the album. And this is the Steven Wilson. It's a double disc. Anybody that doesn't have this album, actually triple disc. It's got 2 CDs and a DVD.
Wow.
And Jethro Tull, man, their deluxe editions of their albums are like to me, it's like kind of the gold standard. They really put a lot into them, a lot of extra shit and stuff. But going to the regular album, I mean, it's got one of my favorite songs, "Teacher." Love that song. I always have. "With You There to Help Me" is the opener on the album. "To Cry You a Song," "Saucily You're a Woman," and just "The Witch's Promise." It's just a great album. I've always loved this album. It's one that I spin always a lot from Jethro Tull, and it's the first album that I believe Martin Barre played on. So I think so. Maybe it was the second one. But anyway, "Benefit" by Jethro Tull is my number 8.
Awesome, interesting. My number 8. This band released 2 albums. That seems to be the ongoing thing here in 1970. These bands releasing a lot of albums. This was the first one of 1970. Their second one I spun and then I chose because I didn't want to choose more than one from each band. But I'm going to go with Creedence, Cosmos Factory.
Yeah.
This starts off with a 7-minute great track. Rambo Tambo, and then the standard "Before You Accuse Me." Traveling band, "Looking Out My Back Door," "Run Through the Jungle," "Up Around the Bed," "Who'll Stop the Rain," and their cover of "I Heard Through the Grapevine" is freaking amazing. I know that everybody turns to Marvin Gaye. I want to hear John Fogerty just go on a rampant guitar solo and sing with his vocals. And then it ends with "Long as I Can See the Light." This sounds like a greatest hits. It's not just another album by CCR, Cosmos Factory, and I think he redid this with his kids. I don't know if it was the same songs or different songs. I don't remember quite that much about it because I really didn't look into it, because this one is just a great album, which is Cosmos Factory by CCR. It's a good album.
Classic, man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Go for it.
All right. So as I mentioned earlier, the Beatles released a total of 6 albums in 1970 amongst band and solo albums. I mentioned that 3 of those are on my list, and in fact, 3 of those are in my top 7.
Wow.
I already mentioned that "Let It Be" is not on my list, and if you know my history with the Beatles and which particular member I think is a joke, you'll know which other 2 albums are not on my list. That being said, the Beatle who I think actually has the best solo career is the lowest of the 3 on my list. And at number 7, that is Paul McCartney's debut solo album, McCartney. What a phenomenal album. I mean, he played almost everything himself with just a little bit of assistance from his wife Linda on some harmony vocals, but almost pretty much all of the instruments are played by Paul, all the vocals aside from some harmonies. The track "Maybe I'm Amazed" became his first really, really big hit from his solo career, but there's just the vibe on this is so different from kind of the overblown entity that the Beatles became in their later years. It kind of strips it back a lot, and it kind of goes for that mid-era, just kind of straight ahead sound that the Beatles had, and it kind of returns to that. And I think it's very effective, and I think it's just, I mean, it's widely regarded as one of his best solo albums, and I definitely agree with that. I mean, I prefer some of the Wings albums more, but it's definitely probably in my top 5 of his solo albums.
Well, like you, I've got 3 albums in my top 7 that all are associated with Beatles. That is not one of them. Yeah, I mean, it's okay, but there's so much that I put above it. Still, I'm more of a Paul McCartney singles hits guy.
Mm.
On his solo stuff. It's more the way that I go with McCartney. But that's just me. All right, Al, what's your next one?
My number 7, and Joe touched on this one before. It's the first album by Emerson, Lake and Palmer. This is a classic. I mean, yeah, probably greatest prog band of all time, arguably like the three greatest musicians in prog. I mean, Keith Emerson, man, he's like, to me, he's like the greatest keyboardist that ever lived, you know. And I got to see him actually. I never saw Emerson, Lake and Palmer together, but I did see Keith Emerson solo in New Jersey at a club, and he was unbelievable. He was awesome. So yeah, the Barbarian, Take a Pebble, Knife Edge, obviously the hit Lucky Man. You know, great album, man. And I'm not going to dwell too much more on it, but it's my number 7. Love it.
Okay, I'll just make sure. My number 7 is going to be, it's going to be a Beatles album, and it's going to be Let It Be as my number 7. It's not one of my favorites by them. No. Is it in my top 5? No. It's in the bottom of their 12 because of obvious reasons, the production, and maybe even the songwriting might have not been up to par of what we're used to. But still, you still have two of us across the universe, which was kind of cheating because it was already a single in '68 and it had already been released different ways. I really do dig the George Harrison's "I Me Mine." The Let It Be is a really good track. I Got a Feeling, and they even pulled out one after 909 from years ago to put it on there, which has always been one of my favorites. And I have always enjoyed The Long and Winding Road, but I prefer it on Let It Be Naked, without the orchestra, without the choir, more with the Beatles doing it, and not the overblown Wallace sound that they did with Phil Spector. And this is part of the what is it, the on the box set that was just released a couple of years ago to coincide with the documentary they had on Disney. So this turned out to be a 4-album set. It's really good stuff on there, you know. So Let It Be by the Beatles is my number 7. All right, go for it, Joe.
All right. So my number 6 is from a band that I, until recently, wasn't really that into, and I've really done a big deep dive on them. I've really gotten into them. I mentioned it on here before, and that is Chicago and their self-titled album from 1970, also known as Chicago 2. Of course, one of their all-time biggest hits, 25 or 6 to 4, is on this album. Almost the entirety of side 2. It's a double album. Almost the entirety of side 2 is the sweet Ballet for a Girl in Buchanan that makes up a couple different songs, including Make Me Smile, which is a pretty big hit for them, Color My World, a couple other songs in there, and there's some other sweets throughout the 4 sides, but I think those first couple Chicago albums especially, I think, are just really, really cohesive albums, and I think they really had a great run from especially the Terry Kath era, but particularly those first couple albums, all the double albums. But I think that's a great run, and particularly this album, Chicago 2, Chicago, whatever you want to call it, for a band that I only recently got into that jumped up this high on my list. Yep, that one right there. That got this high on my list. It tells you how good this album is.
Yeah.
So that's my number 6.
I'm missing 3. I need 3.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have 3, but I got quite a bit. But I do stop at a certain point.
Yeah.
I stop on the teens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you're right. The first few ones, amazing fusion of rock and jazz, such great stuff. Yeah, and that girl from Buchanan, you're right. That's sweet. It's just an amazing sounds. Al, what's up?
All right, man. So my number 6, I'm going with, and Andy, you touched on it before, Idlewild South by Allman Brothers Band. I love that album. I actually have that as part of. There's this album called Beginnings.
Yep.
And it's the first 2 albums actually in one package. So it has Idlewild South, which is their second album. What's cool about this album, the first album is actually remixed on this one. So if you have the first album, original one, and you got this one, Tom Dowd remixed this one replacing Barber's original mix. So if you want to hear like the first album, kind of two different mixes, if you ever see this one, pick it up.
Yeah.
But talking about Ottawa South, which is included on here too, is the second disc in here. Yeah, I mean, in Midnight Rider, In Memory of Elizabeth Reed, Revival. I mean, I love the Allman Brothers Band. They're my favorite Southern rock band. But there was, to me, there was so much more than Southern rock. But they kind of spawned that whole genre, you know.
Yeah.
So all the Southern rock bands kind of looked up to them. They were like the kings, really, you know, of that genre. So, yeah, Ottawa South, man, by Allman Brothers Band. That's my number 6.
Yeah, I got that Beginnings because I can't find their debut on vinyl, so I was able to pick up Beginnings, even though I already had Outer Wild South.
Yeah.
I needed to pick it up to get their debut on there.
Did they get the debut? But if you ever see the debut on its own, get that because it's a different mix.
Oh yeah, I'm still looking for that too. Yeah. But believe me, if I find it that way, I will pick it up. Yeah.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Go ahead, brother.
Now I'm going to my second parts of the Beatles. My uncle, I sent him the list of my list, and he laughed. He said, "Plastic Ono Band, ha ha ha." I said, "Well, first of all, if you never heard it, you know that Yoko's not on it, and if you've never heard it, you know that's no laughing matter."
Mm-hmm.
Plastic Ono Band,
yeah,
by John Lennon. You know, if he had even heard this album, he wouldn't be laughing. There ain't nothing funny about this album. This is pure singer-songwriter putting everything on the table. This is me with quiet songs that's angry, loud. You never really heard anything like this album until this came out. And like our great friend Charles Trainer says, this might even be one of the first alternative rock albums, you know? And it's a really good one. I keep on showing this back picture because it's not one that people really share. So
Yeah.
That's why I have that one. But also Yoko Ono would release hers as well, and they're kind of flip-flopped under the tree. But let me go over it. And of course, this is just a 3-piece. It's with him and Klaus Vorman and Ringo Starr. But this starts off with Mother. It's such an angry song.
Yeah.
And then Hold On John, Working Class Hero, Isolation, Remember, such a good song. I love that song. It kept that beat throughout the song. And of course, it ends with God. I mean, dude, what else can you say about that song, God, where he pretty much strips himself of everything and just confesses it's just me. And I know that people complain about Yoko Ono, but I'll tell you what, they loved each other immensely. And I forgot, Yoko Ono is on this. It says here the wind. So it says Yoko Ono, wind. So I don't remember.
That's one way of putting it.
Yeah. I guess because she kept silent and the banshee of wind didn't come blowing in. But man, Plastic Ono Band by John Lennon. I remember we did a vinyl battle between this one and the McCartney album. And this one won for me, of course, obviously, because the other one's not on here. But yeah, Plastic Ono Band is my next one. Right, so go ahead, Joe.
All right, so my number 5 is the other Frank Zappa album on my list, and mainly for one track. And the album is Burnt Weenie Sandwich. And that track is Little House That I Used to Live In.
Yeah. 18
minutes long, features one of the most intense killer violin solos just coming from out of nowhere. I mean, you have Ian Underwood doing some great stuff on there. You have Motorhead Sherwood doing some great stuff on there. And then Frank coming in with a great guitar solo. And then, of course, some other stuff on side 1, Holiday in Berlin, theme from Burnt Weenie Sandwich, Igor's Boogie. So just different different stuff going on. But for me, the highlight of this album is Little House I Used to Live In.
Right.
And I think it is pretty much single-handedly what puts this album so high on my list. Yeah, so I really I do love Weasels Rip My Flesh, his third album from 1970.
Yeah.
But for me, my favorite one of the three is Burt Weenie Sandwich.
Oh wow, yeah, yeah. I like Weasels Rip My Flesh, but that Burt Weenie Sandwich is a really good album. I found that one not too long ago in Salt Lake City when I went record shopping over there for a very good price too. So I was
Good.
very excited to get that. So yeah, that's a very good album. It really is. It's just not on here because I'm not that familiar with that one quite yet,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why it didn't make my list. All right, Al, well, what do you got going on?
All right, my number 5 was by a band that my older brother was really into, and when I was a kid, I heard a lot of them around the house. And I actually don't. I have the CD, but I don't have it with me. But it's Morrison Hotel by the Doors. Opens up with the iconic Roadhouse Blues. It's got Peace Frog on there, which is really cool. Waiting for the Sun, which is actually a track that's not on the. If you do a show where a track is not on the album that's named after, that could be one of them, because I have Waiting for the Sun. That's not on there, but you got that on here. So Ship of Fools. But yeah, I mean, it's this is going towards the end of their career now, and before Morrison would die. But it's still, I still dig it. I mean, my brother had all the albums, and I heard every one of them, and I love them all. So I'm a huge Doors head. So this is my number 5.
I want to say hi out there to Brian Sanchez. Thank you for watching, Mr. Brian. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Watching our show. My number 5 is going to be, we touched on it already, Led Zeppelin 3. I love this album cover. I mean, they've got no other, I mean, this is an awesome album cover. And then the back is just as badass. The back is awesome. I love it. The songs on here, we've already touched on Immigrant Song, but really side 1 is flawless. With Friends, Celebration Day, Since I've Been Loving You is my favorite track on here. Out on Tiles, you flip it, you get Gallows Pole, another great track. Tangerine, That's the Way, and then it goes with Barnard Strop and Hats Off to Roy Harper, which is a really weird track, but it's really awesome that they went outside their boundaries. That's what makes this album so great, was that no one really expected this to come from them after 1 and 2. And then they do an album like this, which is completely different. The whole sound is completely rearranged. The songwriting is better on this album. I believe it might even be one of their best writings that they've done. That's why I love this album so much, is their writing. So Zeppelin 3 is my number 5.
Cool.
All right. So my number 4 is one that Andy just talked about, and that is John Lennon, Plastic Ono Band. Not much more to say. Andy really did a great job covering so much of this album. Mother, Isolation, Working Class Hero, God. I mean, just so many amazing tracks on this album, and to come from a 3-piece, like you said. And spoiler alert, this album is the only appearance that Ringo Starr will be making on my list. That is my relationship with Ringo Starr is tenuous, to say the least. But we can put it that way. Well, I wouldn't say only. He does feature a little bit on another album that I'll be talking about in a little bit, as we can probably all guess. But yeah, no. Plastic Ono Band is probably my favorite of John Lennon's solo albums. I'm very kind of like you, Andy. How you feel about Paul McCartney's solo stuff is how I feel about John Lennon's solo stuff. I'm very hit or miss on his solo discography, but this is an album that I truly love.
You see, and I can listen to every John Lennon album in the 70s. I can hear them all, and I can't do that with Paul. It's weird. And for a lot of people like yourself, that's the other way around.
Yeah.
And I can understand that because Paul is great too. But I don't know. There's just something about John that it's so different, and maybe it's a little bit too different for others. But yeah, I can understand that. All right, Al, what's your number 4?
All right, my number 4, man. It's been touched on before by you, Andy. I don't know if Joe, I don't think Joe touched on it yet. If he's going to touch on it, but that's Deep Purple's In Rock. Dude, that's the beginning of them really hitting their stride. Now they got Ian Gillan in the group. They're really much heavier now. Opening up with Speed King. I mean, come on, man. Child in Time, which is an epic of epic proportions. Ian Gillan's freaking vocals in that are out of this world. The last track on there, Hard Loving Man, possibly could be the first hard rock gallop that Maiden would make famous later on. A lot of other groups, but the Maiden gallop kind of, I don't know, man. I think Blackmore kind of originated it here, man. If you listen to that track, you'll hear it in there. Yeah. So, this is the first of like a run of classic albums by Deep Purple, and I put it at number 4, man. So that's In Rock, man, my number 4.
I was so surprised I put it so low.
Yeah,
but I couldn't put it any higher against to what I've been talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Are you through, Al? Are you still talking about Deep Purple?
Oh, no, I'm good, man. You can go ahead, Andy.
I guess I'm going to beat Joe to the punch on this one. This album is just amazing. One of my favorite albums, really. And I'm talking about All Things Must Pass by Harrison. Sometimes I read about this album and it says that the third album is untouched. I touch my third album all the time. It's all instrumental with him and his friends just jamming, and it's good, and it's so awesome to hear great musicians that we love just enjoying making music. But dude, let's go through the song, through the songs on here. This is the best that George Harrison will ever get. He put all of his eggs in this one basket, because everything else after this is just kind of mediocre to me. Even though I own everything, I don't really play anything. After the first couple of times, I was like, I think I'll just stick to this one right here. Songs like I'd Have You Anytime, My Sweet Lord, Wah Wah, the great Isn't It a Pity version 1 is just so great. In fact, I was talking to Charles yesterday about the song Wah Wah. Like, is that a diss track on Paul? Wah wah. That he was always crying, but Charles said it's about everybody. It's about all the Beatles. The way that all that ended. And then side 2, What Is Life? If Not For You, Come On. And then Beware of Darkness. I'm gonna let the others just sit there for a while and let you guys touch on that. But this is really a great album. I really enjoy hearing it. To me, it doesn't sound like it's 3 albums long. I mean, 3 vinyls long. It's just a great package that he gave us, his fans. I still have the one that's got the poster of him in front of the inside his house where he looks like death, pretty much. But All Things Must Pass, and it's so easy to hear this and then throw on a concert from Bangladesh. It's an easy transition. So I think If Not For You was the one with Dylan. Is that right?
Yes.
Right. It's a great song. One thing I love about George was his spirituality. No matter what God he he worshipped or whatever, you can always translate that to any kind of spirituality or whatever you choose to follow, and it shines a beam with some of his lyrics, and that's the great thing about George. The Beatles, all four of them really had their own personality. They're all very different. That's one of the reasons I think that they broke up. It was just time for them to break up, and it shows with the 3 albums that they released immediately. So that's my number 4 is All Things Must Pass.
All right. Well, it's my number 3. So so I'll just go right into talking about it. Yeah, just everything Andy said. It's such an amazing album, and this is like George. I was talking earlier in the show with my what I'm listening to now about Steve Hackett, and I see kind of Steve Hackett being a follow up to George Harrison, kind of getting frustrated with his lack of a role in Genesis, much the way that George Harrison was getting frustrated with his lack of a role in the Beatles.
Frustrated.
And then as soon as he got the chance, just plopped out and said, "Okay, here you go. Here's what I can do." And Steve Hackett did much the same thing with his solo albums in the late 70s, when even before he left Genesis, but right before and right after he left Genesis. And of course, with George Harrison, he says, "So I've barely been able to put any songs on the last few Beatles albums. So here's 3 vinyls worth of it." And of course, the third vinyl, like Andy said, is the Apple Jam that people are kind of hit or miss on. I absolutely love it. I think it's just a great example of improvisational musicianship. Just a bunch of guys going in the studio and jamming, and it all sounds amazing. Plus, you have 4 sides of amazing tracks, like Andy mentioned, so many great tracks. I mean, My Sweet Lord became the big hit, but so many different tracks, like Andy mentioned, that just show what a songwriter George really was, and what a musician he really was. And I know lately it's been kind of trendy among some of the groups we're in to bash on George Harrison a lot, particularly a few people. One of whom you just mentioned, Andy. I know Charles, our good buddy. He likes to be trendy and try to say that George Harrison wasn't all that. But I mean, how can you not look at this album and just say it's such an amazing album? And
it's so funny that you mentioned that, because when I was talking to him about this, he said, and I quote, he said, he just said this yesterday: "For all the grief I give George, I like that song, and I do like some of his stuff. I compare him against Lennon and McCartney, and that's why he's that way, because he compares them to them. He can't do that. George is his own person. And, he's just an amazing musician, and it's so cool to hear the Beatles work out like All Things Must Pass, which you can catch on Anthology 3, and they passed on it.
Yeah, and they showed in the Get Back documentary as well.
Yeah, he was getting frustrated because that was better than anything on the Let It Be album.
Yeah.
anything on the Let It Be album. And they passed on it. And I'm pretty sure he was driving to the studio thinking he had gold, and they're like, "Nah, I don't think so." Instead, they put crap like Maggie May and who knows, just stuff that just didn't click. Just think if All Things Must Pass was put on Let It Be. That would have just boosted that album a lot more. It might even have made Joe's List. And if they would have put it also if they would have also put Don't Let Me Down, like John wanted on there. Nope, they're gonna put it as a non-album LP B-side. Really? And when you see that documentary, you see John working on that song almost every single morning. And nope, we're not going to use it. Dude, that was just so much.
The production of that album is just such a mess.
Oh, it is.
It really is. And I mean, there's never been a great version of that album released. I mean, you have the original, you have Let It Be Naked. You have the 2021 remix.
Yeah.
I don't think any of them. I think you can pull and plug, and I prefer the Let It Be Naked version of Long and Winding Road, like you said, and I prefer the single versions of all the singles. So Get Back, Let It Be. I prefer the single versions of those, and then I prefer the original album versions of a couple tracks, and I prefer the 2021 remixes of a couple tracks.
It's so scattered.
It's so scattered. Like they never. It's one of the few times that I can ever say about the Beatles that there was no vision on that album whatsoever, because all of them at various points in the production basically just threw their hands up and said, "You take it, no, you take it, no, you take it," and eventually they just basically foisted it off on Phil Spector, who Phil Spectorified the album, and then Paul hated that, and then it just turned into a whole big mess.
And by that time, Phil Spector was already out of his magic. He was shooting guns at people. He was doing who knows what.
He was doing Phil Spector things.
Yeah. And in fact, we're gonna do a episode on Phil Spector on Three Shots Down coming up soon. But like when you hear "Let It Be," the single that's on Past Masters. With a great guitar solo by George, and then it's not on the LP, you're like, what, Which
is why I'm so glad that they included that version on the Blue album.
Yeah.
That the single version is what's on the Blue album. So when they put out,
that's the rockin' album, because that's the rockin' version.
Yeah.
All right. Al, what's your number 4?
Number 3.
Number 3, yeah, number 3.
Okay, so number 3 is Black Sabbath's Paranoid. I mean, there's really nothing that needs to be said. I don't have a physical copy here with me, but everybody knows what it looks like. The guy fucking with the sword that has nothing to do with being paranoid, in my opinion. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I put it up there, man. It's Iron Man was the first riff I ever learned on guitar, man. I mean, it's just. It's a classic, and I know you can get burnt out on, the song Paranoid and War Pigs and Iron Man, but I mean, it's got my favorite song is probably Electric Funeral. I love that song. Of course, Fairies Wear Boots, Rat Salad, it's just a great, I love Planet Caravan. I love that song, man. It's such a moody, shows a different side of them, and Iommi with the jazzy guitar in there and guitar solo, and just shows a different facet of them. They weren't just straight balls to the wall, heavy metal or anything like that. They had different sides to them, which I love, man. Which is like my top 4 is the heavyweight of bands. So I mean, you'll see who else comes, but that's my number 3, Paranoid, Sabbath.
My number 3 is the best Eric Clapton album ever made. Better than Cream, better than all the solo work together. Talking about Layla and other assorted love songs.
Nice.
Dude, this album kills all the way around. Some of his great guitar work is found on here. A lot of heroin was done during these sessions, but
and Dwayne Allman too.
Huh?
And Dwayne Allman's on there too.
Yep. And Dwayne Allman's on here. And I found I was doing a little bit of reading about that. The band Derek and the Dominos were in Miami doing recording this. And the Allman Brothers also went down to Miami to play a benefit show. And Eric wanted to go see him play because they had never met. So they were able to go see him play. They were able to stand right there from the stage to the barriers of the first row. And Dwayne Allman saw him and he froze. He couldn't play. So Dickie Betts took over for him. Well, at the end of the show, Eric invited him over to the studio, and with no plans of them playing, they played all night long. And they talked about guitars, and they just got so close that he said, "Dude, you got to play on this album." and he's got either the slide solo or a guitar solo on 9 of the 11 tracks on here. So he plays a big part of this, and it's such a good album all the way around. I Looked Away, which is an acoustic ballad. Bell Bottom Blues, which is a slow blues track. Keep on Growing. Nobody knows you when you're down and out. Another great track that Eric does on the unplugged version. I Am Yours, Any Day, The King of the Key of the Highway. Also, he does a version of Little Wing by Hendrix on here. That's so good. I know that sometimes Clapton is overrated with his guitar playing. Sometimes his solo albums aren't what we expect, but this is what you expect from Clapton. So Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs. It's a great album. I love it. And I'm also a couple of these guys that are in the Dominoes, along with Eric, were on All Things Must Pass as well.
Mm-hmm.
So they all ran in a group together, along with Bonnie and Delaney, which is what they all played on before. And I thought I would love that album. I bought it twice and sold it twice. It just doesn't grab me. I was like, ugh. And you would have thought I would have learned. But no. I keep on trying to like that album, but I just don't. So, but that's my number 3. Number 3, Derek and the Dominoes, Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs.
Cool.
Down to number 2, guys.
Alrighty.
Joe.
Well, I'll go ahead and wrap us up on the Deep Purple in Rock as my number 2. So all 3 of us had that on our list. I mean, you guys said it all. I mean, Speed King, Child in Time is one of my absolute favorite Deep Purple songs. But this is for kind of the introduction studio wise to the Mark II lineup.
Yeah.
What a way to introduce yourselves. I mean, right up there is one of my absolute favorite Deep Purple albums. Iconic album cover, so many great tracks. Ian Gillan coming in and just blowing everybody away. Hot off of performing on the original Jesus Christ Superstar, released that same year. Just so many amazing tracks on that album. But yeah, absolutely agree with everything you guys said about Deep Purple in Rock. Amazing album is my number 2.
And that's my favorite version. Is the Mark II. I know that they got back together, blah blah blah, but they were only together for those three or 4 years, and they produced that one, Machine Head, Fireball, and then their Live in Japan album, and then Who Do You Think You Are? No, Who Do We Think We Are? Something like that. You know what I'm talking about. And they were all top-notch albums, all top-notch. All those albums would be in my top 10 of those years, easily. So yeah, Deep Purple is amazing. All right, number 2.
Number 2, man. So again, my older brother, this was like his favorite band when I was growing up, and I heard this heard all their albums all the time. He would bring a vinyl home and open it up and put the record and look at the liner notes, and I kind of just would watch him do this, and he always did it with Zeppelin albums, so it's got to be Zeppelin 3. Mm-hmm. Dude, I mean, yeah, again, it's sandwiched between 2 and 4, but I find myself revisiting this album a lot, man. It shows the more acoustic side, but for me, I love Out in the Tiles, man. It's like one of my favorite songs by Zeppelin ever, and that song just rips, man. It kicks ass. Tangerine, awesome. Obviously, Immigrant Song, Friends. It's just an awesome album, and I think it's when I was younger, I played 2 and 4 more, and the first album more than 3. But now, as I've gotten older, I 3 really kind of stepped up its game, and it's like doesn't have the burnout factor like the other albums do. So that's why I play it a lot more, actually. So it's got to be number 2.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a fantastic album.
Zeppelin 3 at number 2.
Yeah. I wanted to put it at 3, but I was like, nah, I can't do that.
I didn't want to be cliche about it.
Yeah, too much. But my number 2 you're gonna win some money, Al, because this did make my list at number 2 after the Gold Rush by Neil Young. I know I'm predictable, but y'all know how much I love Neil Young.
Oh, of course.
He's
man.
only second to the Beatles. This also has Stephen Stills on it, and also Crazy Horse and Nils Lofgren, and you know his friends that
great
he'll
album,
carry
man.
on for decades. You touch on a couple of songs, but I want to keep on going with "I Believe in You." This was a cover, "Oh Lonesome Me," done by Gibson. Don't let it bring you down. Southern Man. Only love can break your heart. I've always preferred this one over Harvest, even though Harvest was his big hit. And, I always preferred this one after. And he was going through a divorce, or he was breaking up with his girlfriend at the time, who was older than him. Was a good 10 years older. So if you notice, he's going one way, and the old lady is going the other, which signified the breakup of what was going on in his personal life. I mean, he didn't have to get someone so old, but he did. But after the Gold Rush by Neil Young, this really solidified him as being a player in the game, and you're so right, Joe, that he was the star to come out of Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. The others kind of burned out, and Neil kept on pushing forward, moving ahead. When Crosby, Stills, and Nash kind of try to stick to their bread and butter, never really stretched out their sound. And when Neil Young always took chances with every album, didn't care it was going to sell. It was more of a artistic statement and saying, "Hey, this is what I'm writing about this year." So, after the Gold Rush by Neil Young, number 2. A lot of people might be surprised it's not my number 1, but it's my number 2. All right, guys. Number 1. Joe, what's your number 1 album?
I love when Andy does that. It's such a trademark. There it is.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, it literally created a genre. I mean, I couldn't not go with the debut Black Sabbath album. I mean, one of my absolute favorites from them right from the beginning with like everyone likes to say, the song Black Sabbath off the album Black Sabbath by the band Black Sabbath. Just an amazing way to open a career. The Wizard, NIB, Behind the Wall of Sleep, Wicked World, Evil Woman, Warning. I mean, just so many absolutely killer tracks for a debut album. And I mean, just what a way to basically start out this entire thing that we know of as heavy metal.
Yeah.
Absolutely, easily my number 1.
Awesome. Good pick. Oh, number 1. Is that your number 1, Al?
I mean, obviously, yeah. It's got to be my number 1 as well. Just to elaborate, I'm not going to elaborate on the songs. Joe did it, but I've always maintained that when you think about listening to an album like on headphones, right? And you listen to this album on headphones, it almost matches like when you're looking at the cover, like just the atmosphere of the album, of the production. And just to think about it, they went in there, they cranked out this album in what, I don't know, 16 hours or, something like that, man. Like basically like 2 days. And just set up in a studio, throw up a couple of mics, and just record them pretty much live off the floor. Maybe I only did a couple of minimal overdubs, but really that's about it. And just when I met Tony, and I should have asked him, man, I just really wanted to kind of pick his brain of like, how the hell did you get that like sound like in the studio on recording on tape? You know what I mean? Like, just it's amazing, man. Like the crushing tone that he got, man, is just like. But like I kind of consider this album it's a little bit of it's got that, it still has a bluesy like kind of influence in there, which they would shed like a little later on, but by their third album or whatever. But I almost consider it like a heavier Cream. Like it's almost, when you're hearing like I Only Play, it's, and you can listen to Cream, it's almost like they very, very influenced by them, and you can hear it on this album especially. And again, like just the production of it, the fact that it was just done in 2 days, just throw up a bunch of mics and just record them live, and it's just amazing, like the atmosphere that you get like from this album. I mean, I'm still blown away when I listen to it on headphones, like the stuff I could pick up. I don't know what the budget was for the album. Probably not much, but it's like, it's amazing, bro. How much it's just held up, all these years later. I mean, you could fucking get like some 15-year-old probably put the album on. They'd be like, wow, what the hell is this? It's just amazing, So that's my take on it, man. I mean, it's got to be number one, 1970. So I love Black Sabbath so much. So, and Andy, man, go ahead, my friend.
My number one is my favorite album by this band. I don't know if Joe talked on it, but I know Al did. Or maybe Joe did, or maybe he didn't. Sabbath Paranoid.
I did.
Yeah, you did, right? I thought so. Sabbath Paranoid.
Well, I picked it too.
Yeah, we both did.
Yeah, both of y'all did. I know that their debut album, that is both of y'all's number one. So all three of us have Black Sabbath as our favorite. Just that I picked a different album.
Yeah.
Than y'all. But yeah, man, this is an iconic album.
Yeah.
I mean, every track on here is fantastic, from War Pigs to Paranoid. Y'all went through the songs, but Hannah Doom is one that has stuck out to me recently.
Yeah.
A couple of times, when you first hear this album, it's so chock full of those other tracks like War Pigs, Paranoid, Iron Man, and Electric Funeral, and Fairies Wear Boots.
Yeah.
Songs that we know so much about. And then there's Hannah Doom, and you're like, damn, how did I miss this the first time? Because this song is freaking awesome. But I've never heard Sabbath 1, or their debut album on headphones. So I'm going to try that out this weekend.
I just
pull it out and put on my big headphones. Move the chair over there because my headphones don't go that far. And I'm going to check it out like that, man. Because everything does sound different with really good headphones.
Yeah.
And I've had a pair of Radio Shacks for a while that are really good. So everybody, that wraps up our best albums of 1970. Thank you so much for watching. We had a lot of people coming in and out, and a lot of different comments. Thank you so much. Thank you, Joe, for being here with us. We really do appreciate it. You're always
Joe.
welcome here. I'm always glad that when you say yes, you put everything into it. So thank you so much. You really do a good job. And we'll do a show in 2 weeks. We're gonna do one next week, but I was talking to my wife. She's like, so what are we gonna do Wednesday night? I said, I don't know what you're doing, but I got a show. But it's Valentine's Day. So we're going to be doing something, and I'm pretty sure Al's going to be busy that night, too. And I'm pretty sure it's going to be hard to get guests on Valentine's night. I'm pretty sure no one's going to say, let's get it with Andy and Al.
Well, listen, I texted Andy earlier. I think it's a wise decision that we take next week off. But in 2 weeks, I got an idea where we're going to rank songs, top 10 songs that have the number 2 in it. Have to do with number 2. It could be the number 2 could be in it. It could be dual. It could be anything that has to do with number 2 in the song or in the title. Actually, we're gonna rank. It's gonna be cool, man, because you're gonna have to think of songs. There you go, man. Deuce. There you go. That could be an example right there. You know what I mean? So Twice as Hard. That could be an example. You know what I mean? So We're going to be ranking songs that have to do number 2. And the reason why I'm doing that is because we're in February, the second month of the year. So it's kind of my little theme going on our show. So,
Or too
so
legit to
that'll be in
quit.
2 weeks. And that's it, man.
Yeah. Tomorrow I will be on the BS sessions, doing our top 10 or top 11 um ballads.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
For
yeah,
Valentine's.
that's gonna be cool. But Al and I are gonna be on there next week doing a vinyl battle, Zeppelin 1 against Zeppelin 2, which will be interesting, and we'll be back in 2 weeks for the song titles with the number 2 in it. Either, I'm like Al said, whatever different form of the number 2. So
Yeah.
we'll be doing that. That's gonna be a lot of fun. A very a fun dig into song titles.
Yep.
So that's gonna be a lot of fun.
So yeah, man. I hope everybody has a good Super Bowl. You know,
Oh,
and I don't not really. It's not really interesting me, but I don't really care who wins. But but it should be cool, man. I'm just gonna go over some friend's house. They're having a party. It's gonna be cool. Some food, good friends, and stuff like that. So I hope everybody has a great Super Bowl Sunday and a great Valentine's Day if you celebrate that. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. So, Joe, again, thanks for being on as usual. You're a great regular on here, man. We appreciate you always coming on, man.
Thanks for having me.
always fun.
All right, and with that, man, Andy, take it out, bro.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for watching. And like Al said, everybody have a happy Super Bowl Sunday, and also happy Valentine's Day. And it's so great to watch the Super Bowl, the end of another football season, and then getting into baseball season. So a wonderful time, and thank you all for watching and supporting our show. Thank you so much. We really appreciate everything everybody does for us. So thank you so much. Y'all take care, and we'll see you all around.
Cheers. Have a good night.
Bye. And cheers, Mr. Michael Lynch. Thank you for watching. Y'all take care.